Anna, first and foremost, let's start with birthright citizenship, if you don't mind. President Trump signs an executive order, and I think it's lawful to do so, given that it's the executive branch. And I'll make arguments after we end our conversation here. And then it was struck down by a district judge in Seattle, Washington. Just give us your take on that real quickly.
Yeah, I think President Trump, part of this, or keep in mind, we're 4 or 5 days into his administration.
Yes.
Got about 1,500, 1,400 more to go. I think he's trying to start a discussion, right? He tried to do this in 2018 with birthright citizenship, didn't make it more than a few days. I think this is really just the beginning, one court shooting it down. I think it's probably going to have to go all the way up to the Supreme Court. And so really things have just getting moving pretty quickly at this rate.
Tell us about your experience on the southern border, because you made, I had forgotten how many, Anna, but 60 trips down to the border, to the southern border. Explain to people the amount of people that you saw coming into our country illegally.
So it's fluctuated from 2018, but before President Biden took office in 2021, what we historically would see in a year, in the past decade, every month was about 30 to 50,000 people apprehended at the southern border. So those are people who got caught. Certainly 30 to 50,000 is no small number. What we saw under President Biden for 3.5 of his 4 years was 150,000 to 250,000 people arrested at the southern border per month. So major increases. And really what I was seeing when I would go down to places like Eagle Pass, Texas, El Paso, Texas, San Diego, Yuma, Arizona, was just lines and, huge groups of people just coming across. And, journalists try to say, factual, but in certain cases using the terms, pouring across, flooding across, it was all of humanity, and very different than in the past when it would be Mexican males coming across for work, or Central American families, as we saw a decade or so ago. People from more countries, not just more countries, but a greater number of people from countries all over the world coming across, which also made it difficult for Border Patrol. When you're trying to process people and get their basic information, you have someone from, say Zimbabwe, you don't know the language they speak, or someone from Russia and you don't speak Russian. Those are major issues for Border Patrol, but that's what it was like on the ground.
Can I ask you, before Biden's administration came into to power, did you see the amount of different ethnicities, people from different regions, or nationalities, I should say, or was it, once Biden got in, I know it was a lot more people, but as far as nationalities were concerned, did that number change, or was that basically not different, but just the volume changed, perhaps?
Yeah. For the past decade or so, we've seen people from over 150 countries. And for context, There's 194 countries in the world. It's just that we might have seen 20, and one year we're seeing 1,000 from that country. And the Chinese numbers in particular, I don't have them in hand, but they expanded, significantly. And so countries that are of particular interest, Central Asia, those countries had major upticks. So that was a real concern. Special interest countries, they're called. So not necessarily countries with a nexus to terrorism, but that are not necessarily U.S., I should say friends, not enemies, but certainly not friends.
Now, why do you think, okay, so we have this open border crisis, and then we have this judge striking down Trump's birthright citizenship order, and then you have all of these Democrats, legal organizations, ACLU, all these advocacy groups. I don't know. It just seems crazy to me. You realize you have a crisis on the border. The left is so vehemently opposed to this argument or this executive order from President Trump. I mean, I sniff a political rat, so to speak. But what's your take on the issue?
I think President Trump is getting all of his ducks in a line. I think it's still very early to see what it's going to look like, if he's really going to take on sanctuary cities and, possibly go after sanctuary city leaders and state leaders and take them to court for not helping him with his mission. But I think at this point we're starting to see deportation flights, as we saw this morning for the first time out of El Paso, Texas. Trump is just starting to get things going, and I think in the coming weeks we're really going to see a lot more of how this is going down. And once you start seeing that, we'll probably start seeing more lawsuits, likely class action lawsuits for people who are in custody, who maybe were mistreated while being flown back or something's happened. And I think that will really help us understand what's going on behind the scenes at the border and inside the country, where people are being arrested and then detained for deportation.
Okay, again, I'm speaking to my guest, Anna Giaritelli, a Homeland Security reporter at the Washington Examiner. All right, and Anna, I want to ask you about this. We have about a minute and a half left in this block. I'm going to ask you to stay with me because I'll have a couple more questions for you, and I really want people to hear your story. Anna is also working on the book, looking for a publisher, Salem Hat Tip. You're going to want to. You're going to want to hear her story. But Anna, okay, we just a minute or so left in this block. These raids have begun. I suspect that this is going to deter people from wanting to invade our country, at least criminals, and also some of these leaders in other nation states, so like whether it's Venezuela. Maduro seems to be taking back some of these Tren de Aragua gangs. What are you hearing on the ground as far as these ICE raids that have already began to take place? What are you hearing?
Well, Tom Homan, who's the border czar, came out this morning or last night rather, and said that they'd arrested 1,300 people. The White House has officially said about half that number, 583, which is still, a sizable amount. And so I think what the White House is doing, they're also using cargo planes. The flight out yesterday out of El Paso was the first one to get people out of custody and free up detention space. So I think they're getting people out of these cities very quickly, and then we'll be moving them to detention space because, unfortunately, for ICE, you have to detain people. Most of these people do need to go before a federal immigration judge and be ordered removed. They can't just be deported by ICE.
Okay.